Imagine the Great British Bake Off, but the food is made of yarn, the host is wearing a barnacled Matador jacket, and the rules don't matter. That's episode 5 of The Game of Wool. This week is Texture Week, and Tom explains it's something Scotland is famous for. Dramatic landscapes, rugged terrain, and apparently whatever this show thinks texture means. Was Scotland consulted on this episode? I have some questions. As we go into episode 5, I'm starting to think that this show is far more dystopian than any of us realized. From Tom's escalating outfits to judging that shifts so fast it should come with a motion sickness warning, episode 5 is where things really crack. For challenge 1, the brief is amigurumi, but serious. We don't want kawaii, we don't want smiling faces. The judges say, pick your favorite food and make it hyper-realistic, so realistic that we want to just take a bite out of it. Amigurumi is cute, squishy, stylized. You're not supposed to mistake it for real food. No one has ever accidentally taken a bite out of amigurumi food. And even the most hyper-realistic crochet creations I've ever seen still look like crochet. This isn't a criticism, it's just a limitation of the craft. Judges emphasized that they'll be looking for a wide variety of stitches in this project. If you can achieve an excellent effect using a limited number of stitches, why add more on top? Most amigurumi is single crochet with clever shaping. Maybe the problem is that we are 5 episodes into the show and we have only had one expert guest judge. I don't expect Di and Sheila to be crochet experts. They're knitwear designers. So let's bring a crochet judge back, someone who can help shape the challenge and the judging to be more realistic to the craft that they're representing. Putting judges who are clearly inexperienced in crochet in front of a crochet-heavy challenge doesn't just hurt the contestants, it makes the judges look inept. Each week I'm surprised by the challenges that are put in front of me, but each week I'm also impressed by what the amazing contestants are able to do within those restrictions. So let's take a look at what they made this week. Lydia makes East London pies and mash, and the judges say that structurally they're solid. The pies really feel like pies, and Lydia individually knits and stuffs each of those green peas. But then the judges fixate on the mashed potatoes. They wish they had a bottom, they wish that they were filled, and they wish that they were knitted instead of crocheted, because knitting would have made a smoother surface. It would have looked a little bit more realistic, a little bit more mashed potato. Now, I wasn't surprised that they had this feedback because they do show the judges looming over Lydia during the crafting process and asking her, are those done? They don't quite look right. So we had a little foreshadowing they wouldn't be happy with the finished product. But when you compare Lydia's mashed potatoes to all of the other food created for this challenge, they're on par. Knitting her mashed potatoes was not going to suddenly trick anyone into thinking that they were takeout. None of this is real food. Here's what I think is really happening here. The judging of Lydia's mashed potatoes is not happening in isolation. The judges are comparing each crafter's makes to each other in the judging process in a way that just doesn't happen in other reality shows. On British Bake Off, you don't hear, I like your cake, but it's pink. And Bob made his cake green. I wish your cake was green like Bob's, because I like Bob better. And that's basically what's happening here, because Ailsa makes a full Sunday roast and she crochets almost everything, but she knits the mashed potatoes to get a smoother finish. And the judges love the technique. The judges are basically saying, we love that Ailsa knitted her mashed potatoes for more smoothness. Why didn't you do that, Lydia? That is not how judging works. As a teacher, I am thirsty for a rubric on the show. These challenges need to be judged to the brief, not based on whoever happened to be sitting next to you in the barn. A proper rubric is how you reduce bias and keep things fair. But don't get too comfortable, because the judges then immediately turn around and criticize Ailsa, because her roast is just, it's too perfect. Her roast is too perfect to be realistic. So Lydia's crocheted mashed potatoes don't look realistic enough, but Ailsa's food is too perfect, and therefore it's also not realistic enough. None of this is realistic. It is yarn food. No one is going to accidentally take a bite out of any of the food created for this episode. So punishing someone for not creating photorealistic food items out of crochet feels absurd. This episode is the clearest example so far of how dramatically unfair and inconsistent the judging is. The same choice will get praised or criticized depending on the crafter who made it. At this point, it's not the search for Britain's best knitter, it's the search for Di and Sheila's favorite. Isaac makes a bacon, egg, and cheese on an everything bagel. He knits the bagel using short row shaping, and then he hides magnets inside the bagel halves and all of the different components so that everything snaps together. This construction is so clever and creative, and his bagel looks incredible. The judges acknowledge the shaping, they acknowledge the magnets, and then they go in. They criticize that the seasoning on the everything bagel isn't quite even enough. They don't like the shape or the color on the bacon. It's funny because they told Ailsa her food was too perfect to be realistic, but they look at a bagel with uneven seasoning, which in my experience is pretty accurate to my everything bagel experience. That wasn't right either. It's like whatever you give them, it's not gonna be right. And on a personal note, Isaac went to college in Philly, okay? This is an American bacon, egg, and cheese. And as a person who lived in New York City or the New York City suburbs for my entire life, who taught in New York City in the Bronx, who went to the corner store and ordered my own bacon, egg, and cheese pretty often, if you're going to a Yemeni-owned bodega, you are not getting bacon. You're getting turkey bacon. And that color is actually not that far off from what you're getting. But even if you hate the color, fine. The contestants are in a yarn barn full of yarn from the brands who are partnering with and or sponsoring the show. His color choice isn't exactly infinite here. You can't color match when your selection is limited by the brand partnerships of the show. From the color of the bacon to the seasoning on top of the bagel, the judge's critique is personal preference, dressed up as objectivity. Isaac wasn't the only contestant to create bacon, Simon did too, and he created a full English breakfast, so here we're seeing English-style bacon, and the judges liked it a lot more, but not before having an interesting encounter with Simon. Every episode so far, the narrative around Simon, especially with Crochet, is that he's winging it, right? Like first with the dog costumes, he was winging it, and that was bad. But then with the kids' costumes, he wasn't winging it, he actually planned this time, and that was good. So when the judges come up behind Simon, he's actually doing freeform crochet, it's kind of like improvisation, to create his bacon, and the judges get ready to begin, and Simon tells them off. He says he finds the term winging it a little bit derogatory.
The terms winging it feel a little bit sometimes derogatory when it comes to crafting.
Yes.
So in this instance, unlike some other elements of the competition, I believe that for me personally, freeform's been the way to go because it really adds difference.
These are really beautifully done, I have to say.
Freeform crochet is an actual technique, and he's using it for a specific reason. He says that bacon, once you put it in the pan, starts to sizzle and pop and kind of bubble up in places, and he wanted to achieve that effect. And it's really hard to get an organic freeform shape if you're not using an organic freeform technique. They've been painting Simon as this kind of bumbling, unprepared guy, especially with crochet, and that's probably shaped by their knowledge that he learned to crochet for the show. But Simon says to them, no, freeform crochet, it's like jazz. Like you have to understand the music in order to improvise. I'm very glad that Simon called the judges out, and I'm also very glad that it made the edit. But let me tell you, once he does, the judges have nothing but praise for Simon. They love, love, love his bacon, the fat marbling, which Isaac had too, by the way, his crispiness on the edges. Simon could do no wrong after he told the judges what was what. Holger makes seafood ramen, and as we've come to expect from Holger, it is absolutely perfect. He creates depth by using multiple colors to create his noodles, and he knits a platform to raise up the inside of the bowl so he doesn't have to fill the whole thing with toppings. And then a little magic trick. Holger recreates the viral floating chopsticks ramen. It's brilliant. It really, really is. And of course, the judges love it. They have nothing negative to say. But we've hit a point now where it feels like the judges are afraid to critique Holger at all. Every single contestant gets a laundry list of things that they could have done differently, could have done better, and Holger gets unbroken applause. Holger left the wires around his chopsticks uncovered. They could have said, Holger, you could have crocheted the noodles all the way around the wire. You could have draped the noodles better so that the wires were completely hidden. When you look at the floating ramen that you get in a restaurant, you don't see the mechanism holding those chopsticks up. They could have found things to criticize, but they don't, because the judges are intimidated by Holger. This is not to hate on Holger. He is clearly operating on another level, and watching him work is a delight. His personality is so entertaining, and he's so skilled. There's a reason that the entire viewing audience, including me, have completely fallen in love with him. But I think at this point, it's become clear that he is more skilled than the judges, and they are walking on eggshells and tiptoeing around to avoid saying something that reveals that in front of him. And we'll see that even more in Challenge 2. The final contestant for the first challenge is Tracy. She makes seafood pasta, complete with tricolor bow tie pasta and tons of seafood, mussels, shrimp, cockles, a whole list of things. She even puts little beards on her mussels, which really stood out to me from the first watch. Like, I love that detail. But the judges don't like the mussel shell color. She's made the mussels black, and they say there's more nuance than that in a mussel. And then they don't like that her pasta feels a little bit too big to be proportional. And they criticize her for using just one stitch throughout, which is standard amigurumi practice. It's not a flaw. That's the genre. What is the reasonable expectation here? That Tracy capture the subtle iridescence of a mussel shell with solid worsted weight yarn available in the yarn barn in a 12-hour time limit? Tracy gave the mussels beards. If she also added rainbow iridescence, the judges would say they looked unrealistic and rainbow colored. She can't win. This isn't about accuracy anymore. It's nitpicking for nitpicking's sake, and they're criticizing her for using the core stitch of the craft that they are showcasing. At this point, I have genuinely tried and wanted to give Di and Sheila the benefit of the doubt. I really want to believe that the edit is doing them dirty. Di even came into my comment section after episode 1 to defend herself and say, no, we gave hours of technical feedback. It was all cut out. You didn't see any of it. And people who know Di and Sheila in real life have said they're such wonderful people. They're lovely, they're kind, and they're super knowledgeable about their craft. I believe those people. But television editors can't put words in your mouth. And the hovering, the nitpicking, the shifting judging criteria, all of that is real. Someone chose which lines to keep, sure, but they didn't fabricate the lines themselves. And then there's the hair. I've tried to avoid talking about it for 5 episodes, but here we are. We've got 2 chopsticks in 1 bun, 4 chopsticks in 2 buns, 3 chopsticks in 1 bun, plus balls of yarn at the ends. Hair and style is personal preference, and every person should dress how they feel good dressing. But Instagram posts reveal that this isn't Di's usual hairstyle. Like, when she's going to fiber festivals or even just like everyday shots, her hair is generally down. I haven't seen one picture of her with this knitting needle yarn hairstyle before. Now, if this is genuinely her personal style, do your thing, girl, own it. But it doesn't read that way, and on screen, it feels like a production choice. Like someone higher up was like, make her quirky, make it visual, stick some knitting needles in her hair. Like, let's get that quirky grandma vibe going. If this was a production choice, at best, it's a caricature. At worst, it's the show's creators telling us, don't take the judges too seriously, which is an odd choice for a competition show. Regardless of the likability of the judges, Challenge 1 makes something exceptionally clear. The judges, or whoever's designing these briefs, fundamentally misunderstands crochet and amigurumi. They're demanding a realism that the craft just doesn't produce, and they are criticizing or praising the same choice, depending on who's holding the hook. That's not judging. That's bias, dressed up as critique. On to Challenge 2. The crafters are split into pairs and given 10 hours Stitch Dictionary to produce a slouchy, textured, chunky cardigan. They have to use at least 3 stitch textures. If you look closely, it's not a published book, it's a binder. And the stitches that are included in the binder are all of the stitches that have tutorials available on the Wool and the Gang website. This isn't about opening up a world of texture. This is a product catalog to make sure that whatever wins can get turned into a kit. The knitters aren't designing cardigans, they're creating potential SKUs. I won't get too deep into the challenge to kit pipeline because I already talked about it in last week's recap video, so if you missed that and you want to hear more, you can check that one out. Lydia and Simon make a green cardigan with all over cables and a hexagon stitch on the sleeves. This show is absolutely fixated on maximalism. It's like the more stitches you can cram into a garment, the better, but the reality is the more textures you add, the worse it looks. Honestly, given the brief, Lydia and Simon did a great job. I actually think this looks pretty wearable despite all the textures that were thrown into it, and they answered the requirements of the brief. But the judge's big issue is nitpicking the way the ribbing and the lace edging on the bottom of the sweater pull in a little bit and create a ballooning shape. But any experienced knitter watching the show knows that this is a phenomenon that would be fixed in blocking. It is a normal part of the sweater knitting experience. There was no way for them to block this sweater in the time frame that was given to them, and the judges know that. Instead of calling out this is an element that looks a little off but would be fixed in blocking, the judges criticize it. They treat it like a fatal design flaw. And it not only undermines Lydia and Simon's skill, it makes the judges look like they don't know what they're talking about too. Lydia and Simon did everything right up to the final step of knitting a sweater, which is finishing. But that's what the time frame doesn't allow. Tracy and Isaac make a yellow cardigan. Now at this point we already know that Isaac loves color and he loves to use intarsia to create graphic designs, but he had to make a monochrome sweater this time, so he uses stockinette and reverse stockinette stitch to create a smiley face on the back of the sweater. Even with a giant smiley face embellishment on the back of the sweater, it is still not enough texture for the judges, and that's not to mention the sleeves, which feature an all-over bubble stitch, which you would think would add a good amount of texture in their perspective. But the real drama on this sweater is the sleeves, because Tracy is knitting an all-over bubble stitch sleeve, and the technique she's using requires you to drop a stitch down 4 and then pick it back up. But every single time she drops the stitch down, she just leaves it. She doesn't pick it up at all. So when the judges go to look at the sweater, they see a garden of dropped stitches just hanging off the sleeve in every direction and leaving little ladders behind. I have so many questions. Tracy is an experienced knitter. She wears these elaborate, beautiful shawls every episode. She knows what she's doing. And I just can't imagine a world in which an intermediate to an advanced knitter is knitting a sleeve, sees dropped stitches hanging off the fabric as they go, and doesn't notice it. Those dropped stitches are visible immediately. They are hanging off the fabric. They are not the sort of thing you don't notice until you bind off. And then Tracy gets eliminated. And when the judges eliminate her, she giggles. She's the first person cast off who doesn't seem devastated. She says, I've had a great adventure, I've made some friends, and now it's time to go home. Now, there's already been some speculation in past weeks that contestants are going to start trying to get themselves eliminated because the conditions are so unsustainable on the show. It's punishing to knit for that many hours in a week, and the challenges seem pretty out there. So why would contestants really want to stay? Is Tracy our first example? I'm not trying to say she got herself kicked off on purpose, but I'm not trying to say that. What I am saying, it's a very weird mistake for a knitter at her level to make consistently, over and over again, over the entire sleeve of a sweater without noticing it was happening. But until the final episode airs, none of the contestants are allowed to speak about this publicly, so we'll have to wait to find out. This cardigan comes in dead last place with the judges. They do not attempt to hide their distaste and displeasure. They think that it requires much more texture. They don't like the smiley face in the back. But guess which sweater was chosen to be monetized into a kit on the Wool and the Gang website? This one. The simple one, the not textured enough one. Because here's the thing, the judging is rewarding maximalism, more stitches, more texture, more embellishment, more. But when it comes to actually marketing a product that people want to make and buy and knit and wear, maximalism isn't it. And it kind of feels like the judges keep pushing for more, and whoever is designing the kits at Rowan and Wool and the Gang and Surtur is sitting there cringing like, please stop, I need to try and sell at least one of these things. Now, if the yellow cardigan came in last place, who came in first place? Ailsa and Holger. And this is the team up that viewers have been waiting for basically since day one, because Ailsa and Holger have clearly been frontrunners from the very beginning, and their skill is such a high level that it's really fun to see them work. Handing a restrictive brief like this one to two super talented, expert level creative knitters, you're gonna get something really fascinating. And Ailsa and Holger did not disappoint. They decided to construct their sweater sideways. They cast on at the cuffs, they knit all the way into the center spine, and then they Kitchener stitched it right up the back. They found a way to include 8 different textures plus a tassel. Honestly, the construction on the sweater looks really fun to knit. I would personally be interested in buying this kit, which is of course why it didn't become a kit. It's too advanced. Wool and the Gang is not marketing their kits toward advanced knitters, they're marketing them toward beginners, and this is far too advanced of a technique to market as a beginner kit, so it didn't make the cut. During finishing, Holger accidentally seams one panel onto the sweater backwards. And remember, this isn't just like one small piece of the sweater, it is a full half of the sweater that is inside out because of the way that it was constructed. Now during judging, Di and Sheila find that inside out panel and they freeze. They walk around, they look at it, they're trying to determine, was this intentional?
I have an inside out cable.
Do you think it's intentional? What if this is actually a mistake? Because it may be that it's meant to be reversible and it's playful. This is intriguing.
It's a bit of an enigma.
Some stitches work both ways.
This is all about texture, and it does work.
Yes.
Now at this point, they don't know which knitter is behind the sweater, but I think they suspect that it's Holger. And they are terrified that Holger has implemented a clever, creative, reversible cable. They don't want to call it bad, because if they called it wrong, and Holger said, actually, this is my creative genius. This entire sweater is meant to play with texture and color. The judges would look like they didn't know what they were talking about. So the judges play it safe. They say, this is super creative, this is so awesome, like someone created an entirely reversible cable, even though that wasn't the point. As soon as Holger is revealed as the designer, they can't hold back. They say, was it on purpose? Was it a mistake? And Holger reveals that, yeah, it was a mistake. It wasn't on purpose. But because it's Holger, that mistake was already framed as some sort of mystical creative choice because Holger can do no wrong and receive no negative criticism on this show. I think the judges are terrified of calling one of Holger's choices bad and immediately looking out of touch and unfashionable. The judges are not judging the sweaters, they're judging the crafter. and reverse engineering the critique. If they decide you're brilliant, your choices are innovative and creative. And if they've decided you're bad, your choices are wrong no matter what you've done. That's why Simon had to push back this week. They keep walking over to him ready to play the silly, unprepared guy narrative, and he had to say, actually, like, I know what I'm doing, and I'm making decisions on purpose here. I'm not just winging it. So where does this all leave us after Texture Week? This is not just a little silly craft show anymore. It's something dystopian. Because when you step back and take a look at all the moving parts, here's what you see. The show is a kit mill. The crafters are restricted in both materials and design because they have to use the yarn and stitches that are available on the partner brand's website. Outside of cardigans, we haven't seen a single normal knitting appropriate garment. We haven't seen hats, scarves, mittens, or socks. These are things you could reasonably knit in the time frames, but instead we get sofa covers, swimsuits, deck chairs. It's knitting as a spectacle, not knitting as a skill. And Tom is being styled like he's a resident of the Capitol in Pan Am. And every week the outfits get more and more extreme, from a bodysuit that contains an image of his own body on it to whatever this week's Matador costume was. Combine that with how fast he's turned his average knitting hobby into a mega brand, plus constant references back to his Olympic career. It's starting to feel like Capitol versus the districts. The judges are presented as experts, but they talk like someone fed ChatGPT a keyword list. She's using bubble stitch. Quick, say something about texture and drama and risk. If I didn't already know that Di and Sheila have a stellar reputation in the knitting world from outside of the show, I would assume, based on the show alone, that they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And I think the worst part of all, especially given the tagline of the show, is that the contestants' true skill is hidden. And we can get glimpses of it from what the contestants are actually wearing, things they've made in real life outside of the show, but in the barn itself, they can't demonstrate what they can really do. They're handed super chunky yarn, ridiculous briefs, and a binder of stitches pre-approved by the partner brand for monetization into a kit. It's like bringing a bunch of top chefs into a cooking competition and then handing them Betty Crocker cake mix. And yes, they can get creative with it, but it's not necessarily a representation of the true pinnacle of their skills and abilities. When you put this all together and wrap it with the bow of a comedy and satire writer writing the whole script, it starts to feel less like a genuine craft competition and more like a dystopian parody. Next week, we're getting knitted jewelry and lace lampshades. Every week, the show has an opportunity to take a standard knitted item and find creative ways to use it to show the knitter's skills. They pick a stunt instead. But we did get a preview of Simon doing some Viking knitting, and I have gone down a rabbit hole, so I am very excited to see how that turns out. I'll be going live on Sunday to stream my reaction to episode 6. I'd love to have you join me. We can chat about it as we watch together. And if you're a crocheter or an amigurumi person, I'm very curious to hear your reaction to episode 5's first challenge. Like, let me know what you think. What's your take? Did it accurately represent the craft? Leave me a comment down below. I'm just really enjoying talking about the show with all of you. So whether you've been a part of the lives or chatting with me down in the comments, I do read every single comment, even if I don't get a chance to respond. So thank you all for talking this through with me and making me feel a little less alone as I watch this show and process it. As always, it's been really nice to talk about knitting with you all today, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.